Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome you all to another episode of Office Hours. Today's session is entitled Unlocking ERISA, Navigating Insurance Claims, Denials, and Recoupments. As always, I'm your host, Stuart Newsom, here with Infinix, and today we have a special guest, Michelle Ronfeldt, who's our Senior Revenue Cycle Manager here at Infinix, and Michelle has a lot of extensive experience in navigating the complexities of healthcare insurance, and so we thought she'd be a great guest to talk about this subject. So she's here to share a lot of her insights on ERISA. Hey, Michelle, how you doing?
Good. How are you today, Stuart? And thanks for having me here.
Oh yeah, we're so glad that you're here. Yeah, because this is one of those overlooked subjects. I can tell you that a lot of
Mhm.
people are like, ERISA, what is that? And I've never hear it in my talking circles when I speak to a lot of CFOs or revenue cycle managers or experts, whether it's in offices or hospitals. For some reason, ERISA just never comes up. And I guess for those who are not familiar with ERISA, it's actually an act or a law that was signed in 1974, and it stands for the Retirement Income Security Act. And I want to repeat that. It was in 1974. So that's 50 years ago. So, wow, why are we talking about something that came around 50 years ago? And I think it's one of those things that nobody realizes is there, that has standards, has certain rules that the insurance entities have to follow with their dealing with providers. It's kind of like it reminds me of the Correct Coding Initiative. All right. So everyone heard here is all about the Correct Coding Initiative with the bundling and the unbundling of edits. But it was been around since 1996, and yet to this day, we still have issues with bundling and unbundling. I think that's more with the updates and keeping track of the updates than it is actually knowing about it. But this is even worse. Many people don't even know about it. Um, so, Michelle, if you want to elaborate on that a little bit, feel free. Um, Before we get into a deep dive, before I start asking questions, I just want
Okay.
to see if you concur with that.
Okay. Well, I concur with that for sure. And most people believe that it applies to retirement plans, and
Mhm.
it does. And it applies to securities and investments, but it also covers healthcare plans in the private industry. So if you're an employer, it applies to those plans.
Mhm.
What it doesn't apply to is the government plans and police officers and Medicare, because those are issued by the government, or if you're working
Sure,
for the government. But
sure, sure.
yeah, it's a little hidden. It's a little hidden law, and
Right, right. That's probably why we haven't heard much about it.
right.
Now, before we go a little bit deeper into this, I do want to remind everyone, we do have a Q&A section in Zoom. We are going to have, take your questions and be able to answer those. I would ask that you keep it specifically to the topic, but you can ask about anything. And we'll answer it to the best of our ability. If we don't have the answer, then we'll hunt that answer down for you and get it back with you. But essentially today we want to cover, obviously, what is ERISA. We've given you a little hint with that. Michelle's kind of giving you a little hint as well, but we're going to go a little deeper in the type of plans that it covers. We're also going to discuss how ERISA can help manage insurance claims and denials, and then we're going to discuss some strategies that prevent and address recoupments. And so we'll get to what we mean by recoupments a little later. So you've touched on this already, Michelle, but let's see if you can add a little more to that and just kind of get down to the basics of ERISA. Can you explain what type of health plans, which you've already kind of alluded to, that ERISA covers and what ERISA does not cover?
Okay, so ERISA covers about 83% of non-Medicare and non-Medicaid medical claims. So when an insurance is provided by a non-government or non-church employer, the policy is ERISA. So if a patient's working at Walmart, if they're working at, I don't know, Walgreens, your local McDonald's, Burger King, anything, a gas station, the employer owns the policy, that makes it an ERISA policy. But if they're clergy or, like I said before, a police officer or anything, then it's not an ERISA policy, and you can't use the ERISA federal guideline to fight that denial.
Excellent examples, and kind of a good way to focus on that distinction. And it may be why a lot of people don't realize how ERISA can help them and how it protects them, because of those distinctions. They may think, like you said, it's all for retirement plans, for government, even for church, but don't understand how it really can apply to those private insurances. So feeding off that, how do these federal protections under ERISA supersede state insurance laws? You know, because every state has their own little quirks and laws.
Right.
I'm sure you have to follow those and keep up with those.
Right. Yes. So ERISA preempts those, meaning that a higher level of government limits those state laws or even eliminates those the state laws. So ERISA is federally mandated. So the contracts that hospitals, providers' offices sign, those contracts are for non-ERISA, because ERISA, the patient's policy, which is ERISA, which ERISA states, the patient's policy governs those, not the contract that the provider signed. That contract would govern the policies that are not ERISA.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. That makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so state laws still matter, but when the ERISA is going to supersede any state law that may contradict ERISA, you always go by the ERISA laws.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, can you share a case where ERISA successfully helped in resolving a denial for payment in any circumstance or certain circumstances?
I can, and let me find it here. So there was a case, Salmons versus Regent Blue Cross Blue Shield of Oregon, where Blue Cross denied payment for an artificial disc replacement surgery, which is, I've seen that several times. So I'm sure there's several people resonating with this.
Right.
But this would fall under the ERISA investigational exclusion. And the judge ruled in favor of the plaintiff. And this is based off the patient policy per ERISA. They did not have an exclusion in that patient policy calling this investigational. So it was denied incorrectly.
Mm-hmm.
And insurance had to pay for the patient's surgery.
Oh, wow. See, now that's just an interesting insight and development, because I've been to a few meetings, like HFMA or MGMA, where everyone's talking about denials that should not have been denied. And I even had an office hours episode over about a month ago where we talked about how insurance companies, there's about $10.6 billion is what we stated in that from 2022 from that office hours episode that was spent chasing the revenue. So that's just the money chasing the revenue that you deserve, that the insurance company should have paid to begin with. And ERISA can help with this.
Right.
So just kind of moving on to recoupments. So I want to kind of set the stage for you here, Michelle, because recoupments is all about, they can come back, perform an audit, and request that money back. And they're actually using, or payers are actually using AI for this. Before it was, sending in, they kind of looked at who was some outliers. If you were an outlier, then they're going to come in and do an audit sometimes. And we all know how audits go. They'll come in to look for one thing and not find it, but while they're looking, they find another thing, right? And so then they'll jump on that. And those audits were typically just either random And the old adage is it's not a matter of when or if, but when you'll be audited. So eventually to get
Mhm.
around to everyone. But now they're using AI to target audits, and that's a little scary. And we've already talked about in previous episodes as well about how we can utilize AI, how it's important for providers and facilities and hospitals to utilize AI because the payers are using AI and they're using AI to figure out what trends are out there and who to go back and audit. And so it's becoming a little easier for them through automation, through these audit processes to, just the term, recoup revenue that they felt they should not have paid. Um,
Mhm.
so dialing that up for you there, what strategies can providers use to prevent illegal recoupments? And the key word there is illegal recoupments from insurance companies under ERISA. So I think you're going to elaborate on what it means to be illegal.
Right. Illegal because it is the patient's policy. That's one thing. It is the patient's claim.
Mhm.
It's the patient's. We take, as a hospital or provider, we take a lot of ownership over these claims and chasing the money. With the ERISA, it is not our claim to chase because it is the patient's policy. So the patient's policy takes precedence. We get the assignment of benefits, but that's for payment. So when the patient signs that, we are given we're given payment, but that doesn't mean that we own their policy. The patient still owns their policy. We file the claim as a courtesy to the patient, and they still own that. And then
Right,
because of the assignment of benefits, insurance pays us. And so under that the patient's policy, you have to ask yourself, how can insurance recoup money that was paid to the patient? Because it's actually the patient's money that they're paying.
hmm,
And
right,
they're coming in and saying, oh no, we're going to take Mr. Jones's money back for Mr. Smith's um, care. That's illegal.
right,
That's illegal. So if they don't want to pay Mr. Smith's claim, they can't take it from Mr. Jones's. They have to
right,
take it from Mr. Smith. And actually, they have to go back to the patient because it's the patient paying. It's the patient's policy that pays it.
right. And then,
Yes.
and speaking to the strategies that providers can use to prevent that activity, right?
Right.
Um, so what can you speak to maybe just high level, what are some strategies that providers can do on behalf of the patient? As you said,
Right.
they're submitting that claim on behalf of the patient, collecting on behalf of that patient. Um, but when this
Right.
happens, how can they combat that?
Well, insurance knows that many providers don't know. And if they do know, they're not taking action on their rights through ERISA. And so, first of all, is letting your plan administrator know you know your rights through ERISA.
Mhm.
And then, you know, writing a letter, a phone call saying, I know these are my rights through ERISA. These are the court cases that have happened through ERISA. These are the claims that I have that I'm concerned about that fall under the ERISA federal law.
Right. Awesome. And
Mhm.
then how can healthcare providers leverage ERISA, taking advantage of this law to address and resolve those recoupment issues? So, basically they come in and say, okay, we want to recoup this revenue, but how do they address that and resolve it? A little different than the strategy.
Um, Really, they can, I mean, it's kind of the same, you know, I mean,
Kind of the same thing?
to
Okay.
say it's kind of the same thing, just going in with your plan administrator. And I know I've heard other a revenue cycle management company is going in and talking to the CEO or CFO of the insurance company and saying, hey, why y'all doing this? Because ERISA doesn't allow this, and letting them know that, we are going to do appeals on these. There are federal cases on these. This is not allowable.
What's the, in that experience though, how do insurance companies typically respond? I mean, because maybe they're betting on the fact that no one's aware of these laws, no one's aware of these standards and rules. Many times you'll see that recoupment will just go on through. We all know about timely filing. Well, I know there's probably certain limits that they can go back and receive recoupments. Can you speak a little bit to, I guess, the awareness, the importance of the awareness that providers need to have? And maybe this kind of goes into maybe another question I'm going to ask too, is what are some common misconceptions about ERISA that
Okay.
healthcare providers should be aware of? So yeah, that's kind of a twofold question that I'm throwing at you.
Okay. So I'm going to address the timely filing first because it is the patient's plan. If the patient's plan says that they have a year to submit a claim, then the 90 days, what we're all familiar with, is null and void, because the patient's policy says they have a year. So you have a year for timely filing, not what the insurance carrier is trying to impose on the hospital or the physician. And really it's all about letting them know that you know your rights, giving them examples of court cases. And I have actually done this and used this had some of them, a lot of them overturned. So a lot of it is letting them know the cases that apply to whatever you are trying to overturn. So if it's recoupments, using this case, Salmons versus Regent Blue Cross Blue Shield of Oregon, and there's many more out there. If you're doing timely filing, getting that court case on timely filing, submitting that all to your plan administrator, and then gathering all those claims that have to do with those things. So running your report, making sure you have all your timely filing claims, and submitting them all, and maybe doing the big batch appeals with those.
Exactly, exactly. And I'm sure it all boils down to good old fashioned medical necessity, right? And kind of proving that, gathering that information. I would imagine, and maybe you could speak to this as well, but I would imagine, yeah, you can overturn this, you can fight this and win, but still the time, the effort, and the energy that it's now cost your staff, you can never get that back. I guess
Right.
to me, that's the aggravating part, is because I know that insurance companies, uh, we all know that about 15% of claims they're just going to deny because they can, because
Right.
they want to. No really valid reason. They throw a CARC in there or a RARC in there, and they're playing the numbers. They
Right.
know the physicians' offices are they know that physicians' offices are having a hard time keeping up. So when they send this recoupment letter, then it's like, oh, they must be right. I got news for you. The insurance company is not always right.
Right.
And,
Yes.
and even if they're using AI, they especially may not be right. So, because they're putting you in this lump sum. So I don't know if you have any insights on the comments I just made, but that to me, that's the aggravating part, is you may come out victorious, but you got some injuries and bruises because of it.
Right. Yes, it does take a lot of time and a lot of follow-up, but
Mhm.
once you do that and insurance sees that you're serious about this, that this is something you're gonna keep following through with, then it seems to get a little bit easier on your practice, and you get a flow with the different insurance carriers and your plan administrators. They know who you are and that you're going to um come back and appeal these things.
Mhm.
And so they're watching your claims more closely, if you will. I did hear something today that there was the AI is causing all kinds of denials. I think
Mhm.
UHC sent back um I I forget exactly, but I do remember that the reviewer only reviewed them for like 1.2 seconds.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You can play
So
the
you know that
numbers.
was
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And so, yeah, and I also know that there were some instances where, speaking of the denial side, and why this is so important, you kind of hold them to the same standard, and they hold providers to the same standard. Well, we need to hold them to the same standards, and this
right,
rule and this law helps us to do that. I know even with the appeals and the denials, there's you kind of turn the tables on them. And it does, to your point, you're now setting a precedent by taking the fight to them, and that they'll take notice. They're like, okay, pretty soon they're not going to want to waste any time with the ones that are the squeaky wheels, so to
right,
speak,
right,
and just hopefully bypass them. But I know even when AI wasn't around and you had some medical reviews going on, and you had they have physician clinical reviewers looking at these. And I do recall reading some article about a year ago that there was incentives being paid to these reviewers to deny a certain percentage of claims, which to me sounds
right,
criminal. There's nothing that can be
right,
done about that because that's just their policy, right? They can make up their own policy, but again, I think ERISA is there's just some strong information there and standards that everyone should pay attention to.
right. Yes. And it would stop a lot of that and
Mhm.
put more money in the provider or the hospital's pocket that insurance couldn't come back and recoup 2, 3, 4, 5 years later.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Because that's illegal.
Yeah, it is, and that's happening,
Mm-hmm. It's
especially with like E&M coding. The E&M coding, we all know Medicare does this, but the other private insurances will do it as well, but they'll look at their utilization and see what overpayments have been done. Again, they're starting to use AI for this and going back and, I've heard where, okay, well, I'm going to retire, so it won't affect me. Well, yeah, you'll still have to pay that back
right,
if they feel deemed that there's a certain percentage of income that should not have been paid. And that's just E&M only. There's other situations where they're coming back and recouping that. So it's a big topic. I think as of today, we've a little flavor of that. We do encourage you to go out and investigate it some more. I do want to turn it over and give some time for Q&A right now. So if you have not entered a question into the Q&A section, I do encourage you to do that. So now we do have at least one question that for the Q&A session portion. And how can we access and utilize patient policies to ensure compliance with ERISA regulations?
okay. Well, they do keep patient policies on the different insurance websites. We also, I think many of us in revenue cycle have used Availity. And if those things don't work, we can always call the insurance, call the plan administrator, um, or call the employer and get the they call this summer that you can get the summary plan description is what would be needed, and that
Right.
can come from those three places. So it does take a little investigational work to find that, But in the end, it's worth it. And if insurance knows that you're serious about pursuing this, they'll take it serious.
Gotcha. Exactly. And I totally agree. I mean, and there's, you can actually look at information. There's information. You could just Google ERISA and get information out there regarding that. Just that awareness is something that needs to be complete here. There's certain, all the regulations and rules that you need to go down through and understand how you can hold these insurance companies accountable. That's the whole gist of it. And
Right.
basically the whole point of making sure that you understand ERISA. Now it's hard for us to squeeze all this within 30 minutes, so to speak. We could definitely have some follow-up regarding this specifically. You could probably spend hours going over certain scenarios and certain strategies to go over that. But essentially, it's just really just, we're just trying to build an awareness that ERISA is out there, what it has covered. I think Michelle's articulated what entities it's covered, what strategies you can evoke, as well as how you can actually prevent those recoupments from happening by really sticking up for yourselves under and leveraging the ERISA regulations. What do you think about that, Michelle?
Yes, I think that is totally correct. If you do all your follow-up and your due diligence, just like we every day with claims denials, I think this is going to be a more favorable outcome with payments coming in the door. Because I know we follow up on claims every day, write appeal letters every day, call insurance every day, and we hear that famous word, no, right?
Right.
No, no,
Right.
it's not happening. And now we have another avenue to work. And one thing is putting it in writing, giving him that phone call and saying, yes, we have worked hard for our money. We deserve it. And under federal law, we're going to get it.
Right, right. It's just a
Mhm.
matter of citing the federal law. It's on top of being aware and just know what your rights are. We understand to keep up with. There's a lot coming at providers and
Mhm.
provider facilities these days, but it's important to stay on top of all this for sure,
Right,
for sure.
right.
Well, that's going to wrap up this session for this week's office hours. Michelle, I want to thank you for joining us. You did awesome.
Thank you.
And hope that you can join us again soon in the future, because I know you have plenty of topics that you would like to discuss and share
Yes.
with our audience. Meanwhile, everyone else, thank you for joining us as well. We look forward to seeing you at next week's episode of Office Hours and in the future. So thanks everyone, and we hope to see you soon.